You're listening to Level Up Weekly on Radio Harbor Country. Tune in live on the air at WRHC 106.7 and WRHZ 93.5 FM or on the web at www.radioharborcountry.org. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the world of Level Up Weekly, a bounteous, open podcast filled with amazing loot, legitimately challenging enemies, but not too difficult to defeat, and of course, the EXP. Join our fellow big headphone adventurers Dylan the Dude and Spurnaday as they journey on a quest to find the EXP from gaming news and discussion. Hello everybody, welcome to Level Up Weekly, your weekly EXP for gaming news, and today is a little bit different because we're not really technically covering gaming news, but we get a next level experience, if we can consider it that way. We have someone else in the studio with us today, Dylan, which is weird to say. Someone's raided our sanctuary.
And, usually we would be a little more careful and be like, oh, there's a random person scurrying around. But this time it's actually a really nice guest and a really cool person that we've run into. And let's let her introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Hannah Rosner.
Hannah Rosner. And what is it that you do?
I am a screenwriter, and I also am an executive at a screenwriters company in Hollywood.
And that's a higher quality guest than we've had before.
Well, I don't know, man, because I've had some pretty high quality guests. No, I'm just kidding.
You did though.
So yeah, Hannah Rosner, you've pretty much been doing filmmaking since you were 15 years old, according to at least what I was referencing from IMDb. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. I guess I started film school when I was 15, but I started working in film when I went to Columbia when I was about 18 and working on independent films in college that were coming through Chicago. Very prestigious school, if I do say so. Yes.
So, what kind of really started this whole thing for you to go into filmmaking?
Wow. I saw so many great movies that I loved when I was at just a formative age, I guess. I saw a lot with my mom and saw Titanic and Contact, and then I sort of got really into sci-fi, Blade Runner and Star Wars, and I don't know, I got into so many genre movies, and so I started writing short stories and scripts when I was in middle school, and then in high school I wrote a book and wanted to make that into a movie. So I was always interested in it, I guess, and I just sort of was drawn to it. And I always wanted to go to film school, more than I wanted to be a filmmaker for some reason. I wanted to go to film school. I was like, that'll be cool, make films in college.
Yeah, great thing. I've got to meet a couple people. See, I think what's going to be cool about this is that I get to try to pick your brain a little bit to see what a filmmaker's mindset is about. For us here, a lot of it is kind of how do we find a game to be its best structure? How do we think that this story fits well with another structure? Did they code this game properly? I mean, we've had multiple different conversations about it. We've even studied psychology of some people before on this show before. So it's be kind of cool to kind of just get to know who you are and just to see, the different work that you've been with. I mean, right now, the main reason that you're here is for your recent film with Steven Spielberg. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We got the incredible opportunity to write a movie. I work for a writer named Zach Penn, and he was approached by Warner Brothers to adapt the book Ready Player One. That's a New York Times bestseller. It's totally a pop culture phenomenon, and I love it. I've read it multiple times, obviously. And when we started writing it, I could tell that my boss was having so much fun writing it. We were working on 3 or 4 other scripts at the same time, but this was the one that turned out the best because he just loved it. He loved it because there's so much 80s pop culture, video games and the Atari, all the Atari games, and then all the movies that I love from that era, and then the music that I don't really love, but some people love.
Yeah, it's goofy in its own level way, really.
Exactly. So
it fits the theme, what basically it is. You're not a fan of the genre, but you think, this probably fits well.
Totally.
It's good enough.
Yeah, we were
anything 80s.
Well, we were talking before, and he was like, "Man, I really respect the fact they used this in the trailer," and we were just like laughing about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the song was, but when they prep in the trailer for the I was
Tom
like,
Sawyer,
goodness
yeah.
gracious, that's crazy. They were existent before I was even born. Before you were even born.
Yeah, definitely.
So at that point, it's crazy to think, okay, so I guess that's they're just gonna play it, and it's cool to see that. But so if you don't know, Ready Player One, as you said before, pop culture reference up the wazoo. My favorite fact is that in the trailer you saw the Iron Giant, and immediately, and I mean this, the first time I ever watched it and I saw that Iron Giant was in it, I was like, I'm watching this movie.
Yeah.
I want to watch it. I don't even care if it's bad. I just want the cameo of Iron Giant in there.
I mean,
it was fantastic.
Every movie would be better with the Iron Giant in it, really.
Every movie.
Well, it's kind of the one piece of pop culture from our generation, right? Like like everything else in it is so 80s, but I remember Iron Giant as a kid, and so I was very excited when they put that in.
I always remember back when I was little that we had Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon East and West, so West would show stuff that was already on earlier in the day. And because I loved the Iron Giant so much, whenever they showed it, I would always watch it on the East Coast feed. And then I would demand that I was allowed to stay up until the West Coast feed played it so I could watch it on the West Coast feed.
That's awesome.
Nice. So let's talk about some other things you've done before we kind of get more back into Ready Player One. So the one we were just talking about before this point, probably one of your other top highlights, do you think, or do you think that there's one that raises this? I'm talking about Atari Game Over back in 2014.
Yeah, this was a highlight because I was really, really involved. I mean, I was definitely helping to produce the movie, as well as I was the assistant director on set, because oddly we didn't have one. It was a very, very low budget project, and it was a documentary, so they get like a tiny fraction of the budget of most of the movies that my boss writes. So I was really involved, and that was really cool because we flew to Alamogordo and we met this guy, Alamogordo, New Mexico. You've probably never heard of it because it's very small.
We have
town
now.
Very
now
remote.
You know.
Yeah.
It's famous for the Great Atari Dump of 1983, I think. But we went down there and we actually dug up these video games that everyone. It's one of the biggest video game legends. Like you guys probably know.
Yep.
Yeah, that Atari buried these games to basically bury the fact that they had gone under as a company.
For our listeners, we might want to mention what that was. Back when E.T. was the most popular thing out there,
man.
A company was contracted to, or Atari was going to make a game about it. And it turned out to be one of the worst coded, absolute, most unplayable and unfun games to ever exist in the history of gaming.
This game, you can see if you just YouTube it or whatever. Just look at how horrible it was. There was for this little small 8-bit game, it was just so mechanically dysfunctional and so messed up. Just to generalize it. They just were like, we need to get rid of this somehow, because they thought they were going to sell massively on it. And I don't know how their mindset got through that they made, what was it, I think 15 million copies, or how many was it that they said that they claimed? It was
like 20 million, yeah, it was a lot.
What their claim to make that many copies, but the game was so broken, how there wasn't a game tester that came out and said, I don't know, guys, I think we should take another 2 years on this.
Well, it's funny because back when I was a kid, there was a TV channel called G4, which always put a lot of video game related media and shows on. And they actually made a show about game developers, and in that show they did a episode where they got contracted to make the E.T. game, and they were given this huge budget, but they spent it all on a clone of a pterodactyl that would fly around their office, and wasted all the money.
Worth it.
And then tried to code the game in 2 days or a day or whatever. And that's why, that's what they used to explain why the game was so bad.
Well, yeah. What did they use how did they code it? When was this, recently?
In the series, they did it, because the series took place in the 80s.
Okay.
So it took place around this time.
Right.
And their whole thing was hey, I can use my sophomore thesis from game school, and we can just reskin things. And he's like, what do you get on that project? D-.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, you make a good point, actually, because the reason that game was it was terrible, absolutely. But the reason that game was so terrible was they rushed production, it was sort of like the first example of corporate greed in video games, which is now par for the course, and same in the film industry.
I mean, just look at Sega nowadays. I mean,
Yeah.
just look at how many different Sonic games have just plummeted in
Right.
their ratings since 06.
We have talked about this numerous times from all fronts, from DLC to just exploiting certain things, and I believe that because I've seen the documentary before.
Oh, cool.
And when I first watched it, it was something I was scrolling through on TV. It was actually on this G4 channel that I saw it, and I always thought it was a myth. I always heard that it happened, but I never believed it. And then when I saw the documentary, I was just beside myself with the fact that this actually exists. This actually happened.
Yeah.
And I was so happy that it was. I remember I was ranting to my mom and dad afterwards, like, "Mom, you have to see this documentary. It was so cool." They and like, as an excited little kid would be. But I thought it was a very well-made movie back then. I watched it again, I think 3 years or a year ago, maybe. I'm trying to remember when I watched it again. I watched it again recently, and I thought it was pretty good, especially since I know those things don't get the biggest budget, like you said. What was your role in that again? You were your boss was the one that was.
He directed it. Yeah.
And you were just.
You were the you were director's supervisor.
Yeah, I was director's assistant, or the assistant director. I was also the director's assistant, but I was the assistant director, which is kind of, you're sort of in charge of everything in a way, but yet you're very behind the scenes. Like, you're making sure that everybody's there where they need to be, and that the extras are where they need to be, and that just sort of that everything's running on time.
To compress it, basically, you're focusing on the minute details.
Yeah.
The director is focusing on the big picture.
The creative.
Yep.
Yeah, like what shot is coming up next, and where, because they're not actors, they're real people. So it's difficult to be like, all right, you need to stand over there. When the light hits you, you're going to say this thing. And they're like, what?
Wait, did we study this?
Yeah.
Exactly. So Atari Game Over back in 2014. Just from your list from earlier, you've had a lot of experience beforehand. You were director in Park City.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this before, and they really didn't provide me much of a description. You mind telling me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Park City is a mockumentary. It's a comedy that I directed. It was a while ago now, maybe 5 years ago. But it's about, maybe more, but it's about a group of filmmakers. Like there's a producer, a director, actor, and just the PA, who's just kind of their friend, you know. And they go to Sundance, which is Park City, Utah, is where they have Sundance, to screen their movie. But for the first time, it's like their debut. But they lose their film print the night before their screening.
Oh, my.
Because they party so hard the night before. It's like Sundance is kind of like Vegas of film festivals. Like, it's actually insane.
So The Hangover copied your premise.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Pretty much.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a lot of fun. I really should check that out, since we were looking at all this stuff and I was like, that seems like, from what little information it gave, that seems good.
I still have Amazon Prime, so I think we know we can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's only on iTunes. I don't think it's on Amazon Prime yet.
Gotcha.
We should make IMDb
iTunes.
update that, because apparently it's a Prime Video exclusive or something. It says on there.
Well,
Thanks, Amazon.
One more thing that you did, and this amazed me, because back when I was in high school, everyone had their lofty goals of, I want to write a book, I want to do this, I want to do that. And it turns out that when you were 15, you actually did write a novel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Ambulance Club?
Yeah, it's so long ago. I can't even.
It's crazy to believe that.
Is it one of those things that you wrote so long ago, you look back at it and you go, man, did I really make this?
I can't believe I did it. It was so. I mean, I was writing about things I had no idea. It was like about this girl that moves to a new school in Laurel Canyon, California, which is actually where I now live. But at the time, I thought it was just this exotic place where all these salacious things happened, and it sounded like the best place to go to high school. But she moves to a new school and doesn't fit in, so she kind of joins this clique that, as she goes through sort of this hazing process, starts to realize that they're almost like a cult. Like, they're just very much about being popular at any cost. And so it's kind of like this drama, and I'm sure now it would be like maybe a good CW show or something, but not really my...
Airing right before The Flash.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that inspired that beforehand. So before that point, did you going through, I would presume, high school, I mean, you were pretty local to our area. Mm-hmm. You're originally from Bridgman. For us at least you're from Three Oaks, I'm from Stevensville.
It's right in the middle, really.
So we're all
Yeah.
kind of in that ballpark area. So what, growing up, were you that kid that like sat with glasses and sat on the park bench during recess and started like writing stories or something, or what was your
Not
life
really.
back?
I was actually like, I was playing sports, and I was in. No, I wasn't even really that kind of kid, but I always I read everything, and I watched like so many movies as a kid. So I think it was always like a secret passion. And then at some point around the time I wrote the book, I was like, I kind of want to do this for life. Like, this is what I want to do with my life, is write and create things and direct movies. But at recess, I was like playing soccer and running around. And
What sports did you play? So I assume soccer.
I played
that you just said?
soccer. I played volleyball, which I quit. I played basketball, and I quit. That was not like the hand-eye coordination thing.
Yeah.
Was not a thing. But I just liked running around and kicking people.
What position in soccer, out of curiosity?
I was a defender at the
Okay,
time.
cool. See, you would have been my best friend then, because
Yeah.
I was a goalkeeper back in my high school.
Oh, nice. Yes,
Uh,
we would have communicated.
See, it would have worked really well,
much.
because if you were on my team, then I could have gotten even more records than I had beforehand. So, sweet. This would have worked out really well then.
I wish I would have been around for that.
See, there you go. I don't think we didn't have boys and girls playing together at the same time, but we would have made it
Yeah,
happen.
we would have made it happen.
We just would have figured it out. We would have been the first ones.
Well,
Totally.
RV did, because we didn't actually have enough to
I remember
make
that.
either team. So
I
we did
remember that
actually,
too.
Yep.
Yeah, River Valley had the, yeah.
We made do with
man.
what we had, but
Yeah.
but back to the topic at hand. So the biggest thing, definitely going back to it, that you've worked on is Ready Player One. And what exactly did you do on that set?
Okay, so I helped write the movie, and then when it came time we were going to England, we were about to shoot the movie, and I was sort of the liaison between the script itself. Like, I knew everything about the script, and I knew everything about the book, and the visual effects department were very involved they were showing Steven Spielberg, for those who don't know him on a first name basis. Just kidding. I don't know him on a first name basis.
I don't know him on a first name basis. I'm
Not
sad
many
now.
many do.
It's Mr. Spielberg to
Mr.
you.
Spielberg, yes.
Hey, Steve, how you doing today?
Yeah, I call him Steve. No big deal. But
Steve-O.
But the visual effects team would put together they would like pre-animate maybe this is a video game thing too, I don't know, but they would like pre-animate the scenes before we would shoot them, so he knew what they were going to look like.
Kind of like a storyboard?
Very much like it was like an animated storyboard, exactly, but very, very high quality. And so I would go to those meetings and take notes and sort of make sure that all the other departments knew knew that it correlated with what was in the script. So I can say this now: the Iron Giant, for example, we had to make sure that the design of the Iron Giant and the way that he moved, or the way he moved and the way that he interacted with other characters fit what was in the script, so that Steven was seeing something that was accurate. So I was sort of like, it's hard to describe, but I was sort of like the script supervisor before we started shooting, and then once we started shooting, I was the script coordinator, which means that I was in charge of making sure that Steven got all of the that Steven's notes got to Zach, the writer, and that we would help, I would help Zach do the notes, and the day we were rewriting pages the day that we were shooting them. So we would get up at like 5 a.m, get Steven's notes, make sure we did them on those pages, and then I would literally print those pages and give them to the first AD, who then would distribute them to the actors. And then if the actors had any questions, I had to answer their questions. So I just sort of had to be the expert on the script once again for like 3 months every day.
One way to put it is you were like a mediator between it.
I was a mediator,
Once Steven would go through his notes, his changes, anything that would go directly over to then the writers, which then would go over to the actors right after that. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
That's very correct, because there's and not just the actors, there's so many people on a movie like this.
How many do you think staff-wise that you probably worked with?
I would maybe... That's hard to say. I would say maybe there was probably 150 people on set, but that doesn't count like the editors, and there's just people.
And probably the other extras that you mixed
the people
in
that work in the back rooms, and
Yeah, behind the scenes. Yeah.
different production companies that come in that weren't on set, but you just sent the film over to and whatnot.
Right.
So, yeah, gotcha.
So, what was it like for you? Because I know if when I hear the name Steven Spielberg, I'm like, whoa, the dude that made this movie. He was in charge of Animania. You know, he owned all this stuff, things from my childhood. Did you kind of have a similar reaction? Like, oh, wow, it's my hero almost.
Yeah. I mean, everyone, even people who have worked with him for years, are still like, wow, it's Steven Spielberg. Like, he's just, you know, he truly is a genius. Like, so seeing him work every day was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And seeing the way that he interacted with his crew and his people, the people that he trusted, that he's made so many amazing movies that we've all grown up with. So to work with him was really seeing a master at work. It was like next level film school. And I didn't have a lot of interaction with him because he's making a movie, you know, he's a busy
of course,
guy.
Yeah.
But I would bring him, you know, the notes and the pages, and I would interact with him. And but the last day that I was on set, and I totally thought, all right, there's 150 people working on this movie. He doesn't meet, more than like a handful of them, and then they delegate to their people and whatever. So I was like, I'm just off his radar, you know. I'm running around all day, but I'm sure he doesn't see me. He's got other things to do. But the last day that I was on set, my boss was cool enough to call me over, and while he was sitting with Steven and like his two producers and the writer, the author, Ernie Klein. And anyway, so Zach called me over and said, oh, hey, you know, everybody, it's Hannah's last day. And so I started saying goodbye to everyone. And there was a part of my brain that was like, just say thank you to Steven. Just be cool. Don't freak out. Like, don't get weird. So I was like, Steven, thank you so much for this opportunity. This was an amazing experience, and this is going to be a great movie, or something. I don't know what I said, but he gave me like a double handshake and was like, wow, you worked really hard on this movie. And I was like, what? You saw me? Like, you noticed? This is awesome.
That's got to be the greatest feeling of recognition from someone of that caliber.
It was totally a career moment for me, so...
My curiosity is, when you first met him, was there anything that was like really great? Did you kind of freak out when you first met him? Like, so walk us through what the first time that you met him was. Now, going back from that pivotal moment where he's like, you did a great job.
Right. No, I mean, the first time I met him was not as eventful at all. It was like, oh, hi, like, nice to meet you. Like, he was super nice, but it wasn't like, oh, you know.
You weren't like, you're Steven Spielberg, wow.
No, but I bet a lot of people do that. In fact,
Yeah.
actually, we had a handful of extras who were, you know, local, like people that lived in England where we were shooting, and they like would give him, you know, their DVD, like, I made this movie and you should watch it, or like, you know, this is the thank you note. And he was so gracious and like sweet, where I would have been like, really? I'm Steven Spielberg. You want me to watch your movie?
Oh, man.
No, I wouldn't have done that.
So coming from our community college, I think this is really great to put on this year. Dylan, I don't know if you've ever had this situation. It's happened to me twice, where people have just legitimately given their mixtapes to me because I mentioned one or two things about doing some form of audio production. And they're like, yo, wait, you do audio mixing? I was like, I mean, kind of. And he was like, do you do anything with music? And I was like, I mean, I tried once and it failed, but I mainly do podcast work. And he's like, hey, I got this CD you should listen to. And I'm like, oh, no. So I would take it nicely, and I felt bad because the second time that it happened, I actually... I saw them turn around, go to the library, and then there's a little trash can that we usually hang out. We don't literally hang out.
Oh, yeah, there's a trash can you hang out of.
Yeah,
of
there's
course.
a trash can that we all do that. But by the cafeteria, we would just, I would turn the corner and I just tossed it in there. I felt really bad, but I knew what that was going to sound like because someone else was telling me that he was very notorious for doing that. So it's always really funny when people like hear one little thing about your previous success and just try to play it off like, oh, hey, you should totally do this and see if we're to your level.
Well, I'm a big music guy, and I actually am quote unquote friends with a guy named Billy Corgan, the lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh, a guy named Billy Corgan.
Yeah, you know.
No big deal. And you dropped something. It's his name.
Yeah, you know, right? Yeah. But
why did I look on the ground when you did that?
But because and I met him completely through random happenstance. We bonded over pro wrestling, which is something we're both fans of, and I've talked to him on Skype a few times.
That's cool.
And I tell people that story, and oh boy, everyone's like, "Oh, do you think you can get me to like guest session on this thing?" And I'm like, I'm not that important to him. Like, what do you think I am?
You're familiar with Mystery Skulls, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I told you that I'm kind of friends with him now, right?
Yeah.
After we went to a convention one year.
Who's
are you
Mystery
familiar?
Skulls?
He's kind of like an EDM slash... I don't know. He's been around since like the 90s. He's
okay.
fairly well known. He somehow still makes vinyl. I don't know why, but anyway, it's just kind of funny when you talk about that. And there's just one time that he was just randomly walking around the convention and no one caught that, and I just started saying hey, and we just talked for like 20 minutes and then just started hanging out. He's just about to go on stage. I almost got pulled up on stage, but unfortunately I wasn't that lucky. It was the next DJ that I got the opportunity. But anyway, we're diverting hard right now, so let me bring it back around here. Now, obviously, we talked about being there with Steven Spielberg, but you, of course, working directly with the actors itself, worked with, let's start with the first one, T.J. Miller. So what was it like working with T.J. Miller and Hannah, gosh, what's her last name now? I can't remember.
Hannah John Kamen?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I didn't work with her too much. She was like sort of not a smaller part, but all of her scenes we kind of shot in a couple days.
Yeah, like she wasn't like the main
cool,
focus like for her scenes.
Yeah. I love the Black Mirror episode she's in though, so you guys should see it.
Yeah,
I will definitely keep that in mind for sure.
Yeah.
So what was it like working with them then? Was there any cool stories that you can talk about, or anything that won't break disclosure or make them hate you?
Yeah, no, I will tell a story. TJ Miller is like the coolest person in the world.
I have heard that.
He's the funniest person in the world. All the actors were everyone was amazing. Like Ben Mendelsohn, who's like a huge, he's in Star Wars and Bloodline, and he's awesome. And Ty Sheridan and Olivia Cook, I'm obsessed with her. But everybody was great. I only have one good story though, I guess. And it wasn't even from on set, but TJ Miller was super cool, and he got along great with all of our crew members. And he invited everybody to go see a stand-up show that he was doing that my mom came to as well. I'm pointing at her because she's here. Right? Did you come to that? Mm-hmm. But he invited everybody from the crew to his stand-up show that was at this place literally called the Top Secret Comedy Club or something, like in London. And... it was awesome. Like, probably like 60 people from our movie were there, and maybe like 30 or 40 people that were just in off the street to see his show. And he completely improvised the whole thing, or maybe he just seemed like it, but he was great. But he had this thing on set where, because we were shooting like 80% motion capture, which is, if you don't know what motion capture is, I don't actually really know what it is, so I'm going to totally butcher the explanation, but they basically put this suit on you, and the visual effects calibrates your movement, and the computer reanimates that into...
Yeah,
that's what CG is.
Yeah, there's a piece of software that you wear this suit that has different sensors, and it's really funny if I remember correctly, they look really funny when you look at it. It looks close. Really funny. They almost look like, from a distance, they almost look like you just like glued cotton balls on people, and it's really funny. But they put that all together. The software then reads those exact motions. But if I remember correctly, you can't move like super fast with those things. No. Like most of it, motion capture wise, if you're like sprinting and your arms are going too fast, you can really cause a major issue. Someone had that motion capture issue in a video game a long time ago for something in NBA 2K.
I thought it was Uncharted.
Uncharted 4?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm trying to remember which one that was then that had that issue, but whatever the case, so...
Regardless, your story about motion capture?
No, that is worth saying, because it's like the whole motion capture thing. It's like their hair really messes up motion capture. There's certain things that it is difficult to... But TJ Miller, he just looked hilarious because he was wearing this motion capture suit. So imagine a man in an all-black suit covered in little cotton balls, and he's got like, everybody had a different colored butt flap. Like basically They literally had like a flap over their butt that was a different color, and you'd be like, oh, that's Olivia with the red butt, and that's TJ with the green butt.
You're on set just like, yep, that's TJ.
Yeah,
how can you tell?
They don't even have to turn around. And he also had like these little dots all over his face, and his hair in pigtails because he has a big fro.
Yeah.
So he looked hysterical every day, but at the end of the day, or at the end of a shot, the way that the motion capture system would calibrate every single image is you would put your hands up in a T pose. I'm doing it now. You can't see. But he would put his hands up in a T pose. And so when we went to his show, and he kept saying on set, he was like, I got the best T-pose in Hollywood. Nobody's got a T-pose like mine. So when we were at his show, I leaned over to Olivia and I said, hey, let's start the T-pose. Let's like say T-pose just one time. He'll love it. Well, I was wrong. He did love it, but there was a bunch of the crew members that were like the lighting guys, local like British guys that work on every big movie, and so they were hammered. They were so drunk.
Boy, this is leading to a great
and so
story.
I was like, T-pose, and they all stood up and were like, T-pose, and they wouldn't stop doing it for like a half hour, and I was like,
man.
oh my God, please no one tell TJ that I started that. So don't tell TJ I started that.
Don't
That's
worry,
fine.
TJ won't know you started
It's fine.
that.
There's a very high chance that he probably will not see this podcast. If he
Phew.
does, that'd be kind of entertaining. You can find us on Podbean.
I laugh. He just comments T-pose.
But would we know that's his username or just someone that was representing him? We'll never know.
You'll never know.
Well, it's funny because
Shoots us an email and is like, hey, I'd like to come on your show so we can clarify that.
I've seen TJ Miller. I've seen a lot of his comedy, his stand-ups, like on YouTube and Comedy Central and stuff. As well as I've seen Deadpool like 7 times, so I
Oh
saw
my
his
God,
part in
it's
that.
so funny.
It is so great. And I also remember I watched this cartoon and called Gravity Falls, and he voices like a super goth teenager in it. And every time I hear it, I'm like, that's TJ Miller? Because
awesome.
I'm like, that's totally not what I see when I see, TJ Miller being a goofball and everything. And he's like, oh, I'm an angsty kid. And it's like, wow. I mean, range.
Yeah.
So one question that I had was basically, how did you get onto Ready Player One? Like you said you worked for a company off it.
Yeah.
Let's kind of go into that first. How did you get into the company? Then kind of how you got into that role.
Well, I've worked for this writer for about 6 years now. I mean, he's my mentor, 100%. But I started out as his intern at his company, which used to be a lot bigger. It was like he had a vice president who helped him with all of his development and the actual writing, and they needed a personal assistant, and they needed a couple interns. So I was one of his interns. And when both of his assistants moved on, I said, I would really love to work for you. And he was like, well, that's great, but you don't really have a lot of experience. So he actually was not going to hire me. And I sort of wore him down, I guess, until he ended up hiring me.
You just kept asking the question until he said yes. And
no,
please
I guess
stop.
I actually I just kept showing up and working really hard and staying late and doing whatever needed to be done because I really wanted to work with him. He worked on, when I started working for him, he was writing The Avengers. And I'm not even really a big comic book movie person, but still, that's a movie that a lot of people see.
That's a pretty
So,
big, yeah.
I think
The original Avengers
yeah.
originally, I think, is top 3 on highest gross
Movies, yeah, like top 5, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I know for sure top 5. I thought for sure it was top 3.
It probably
But
is.
so what is his name, by the way? I don't know how I don't know his name off the top of my head.
Well, writers don't get a ton of
True.
recognition. His
That's
name
very
is
true.
Zach Penn, and but I think that's part of why I want to be a writer. Actually, is like you are recognized for what you do, but not so much who you are. So you can kind of it's a little more, I guess, private than being an actor. Obviously, you're just in the spotlight.
Yeah, you're not necessarily in the limelight right off the
Right.
bat, but you're the one that created the ability
Right.
for actors to be in the limelight.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's-
kind of like we're working radio so long. In most of my shows, I don't take the dominant part, but I do work the tech and, just like script some of the show out, bullet points, and usually work as a producer. And, that's much more fulfilling to me than just being, I'm a glory hound, look at me.
Yeah,
And that's kind of what a writer.
Being the face of it, granted, it's a cool thing to be like, wow, everyone knows you. But at the same time, though, it's kind of like, I almost consider it with voice actors in a similar way
Yeah.
like this. They only know you for a particular aspect of it. But the cool thing is that because of that aspect, there's so many different things that people don't know about you. And then once you start learning about it, it's this cool, different experience that comes out of it. For example, for writing, let's get into that. It's really cool that like your creative process was able to just put together what was already there, and then for someone else to follow up behind that and act out what you put beforehand. So to get to LA, how did you land that position?
Well, I actually moved to LA with no job prospects whatsoever. It was just
a move to LA.
Yeah,
Okay.
I knew I had to do it, and I love Chicago, and I would have loved to stay, but there's not a huge film industry. Like, movies come through and shoot
Yeah.
in Chicago, but I wanted to be one of the creatives, either a producer, a writer, director, and so I knew I needed to be in LA. So I just sort of, I knew that my last semester was going to be spent in LA. Columbia has this great program. It's called the Semester in LA program, and it's like 5 weeks of intensive writing, directing, producing, or production design, or whatever your concentration is. And I would never have survived LA without it, because I got to meet, that's how I met Zach. Actually, he spoke at my class, and I met a lot of other writers and directors and actors who came to speak to our school, to our class. And I moved there, and I knew I wanted to stay there, and I wanted to work there. And so, but it was really hard, because to get your first job, you sort of have to already have had a job, which you're like, well, how, I was in college, how was I supposed to get a job?
Yeah,
right.
They expect you to have an internship, and you can't get an internship without getting school credit. So a lot of people don't, a lot of, kids don't know that, like, how hard it's going to be getting out of school. There's not a huge job market. It's very crowded. So a lot of my friends, we sort of just had to live off of, like, I lived in a studio apartment with two of my friends from college, tiny studio apartment, not in a great part of LA, and was eating, like, chips and, like, canned, soup and beans and stuff for a long time. But we figured it out, and after this internship was unpaid, where I worked for Zach, and then I started working for another production company they were editing this movie called Going the Distance. It was like with Justin Long and Drew Barrymore. It was like a rom-com.
Sounds kind of familiar,
A couple
yeah.
years ago.
What was the name of it again?
It was called Going the Distance. It was funny, actually.
I've heard of it.
Sounds familiar,
I've
yeah.
watched
Yeah.
it. I know what he's talking about, because I remember.
You don't need to. I mean,
You
it's
don't
good,
need to
but,
see it.
like,
Don't
I don't
worry
know
about
I
it.
don't know if it's your.
We're
I don't
only
know if it's your
here
cup of
for
tea.
Ready Player One comes out March 30th,
Yeah.
2018.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like,
That's
you
when
know,
it came out already.
yeah, it's like, you know what, I'll just go watch with my, like, I'll only watch if my girlfriend makes me or something,
Yeah,
something like
it's that kind of movie. But it was.
They have to pay me to go and watch that movie.
No, it's not that bad.
No, that's Birdemic. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Oh, that was quite the film.
Yeah.
But anyway, outside of that, we're roughly sitting at about 15 minutes roughly away here. But just kind of touch base on this, to keep talking about when you first moved over to LA. People that go over, they have this vision that they want to make their big dream, whatever the case would be. Writer, actor, musician, producer. I mean, name it. Graphic designer. I mean, everyone's out there
Right.
at this stage of the game. So when you first came out there was, I would assume psychologically, this mindset of, I got to do something when I get out there. So I think that was probably your main drive that you went to LA for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I knew I had to do something, and I sort of was like, I'll do anything, Like,
Yeah.
it was just whatever comes my
You're
way.
like, I have a degree. Whoever hires me first,
I mean-
gets the pleasure of working with me.
Exactly. But no, I think I definitely was a little naive and I had no idea what I was in for, but if I had, I might have chickened out,
Mm-hmm.
But I think, if I could offer, I guess, one piece of advice to someone that does want to pursue their dream, whether that be in LA or anywhere, is just, like, have some patience, because it takes a long time to develop your craft, and you think right out of college you're just ready for whatever the world throws at you, and you're not. It takes working with people who do know what they're doing and learning so much more than you possibly can going to school. You have to just be out there and be doing it, and sometimes that requires scrapping together some money to make a film or doing a radio show. Like, this is really cool that you guys are doing this.
For sure.
Like, just doing what you want to do and what you're passionate about, and it'll happen. It might not happen instantly, but
Yeah, definitely. This took us to get, honestly, even to get on the radio station. For us, we really never kind of crossed that. We were just guys that threw up our first maybe 20 episodes. I mean, the last quote-unquote season that we had someone from the UK that we would record with, and it was over some Skype call. And, now Dylan and I sat down and we're like, okay, this year, like, let's make this a legitimate thing that we're going to make this out of. So that's how Level Up Weekly was designed. And for us, it was always really cool because we were the kids that you got out of school, you had a night class or something, and you'd go and you'd walk out to your car and you'd sit there till like 12:30 at night or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember someone giving me the call that they were about to call the cops because they were concerned. It was like 2 a.m. We were out in a college parking lot, and the security guy comes up and is like, "What are you guys doing out here?" It's like, "Oh, we were just talking about stuff." So that's just how our show was founded. Was just two best friends just kind of like, "Hey, look at this thing. We can talk about something for an hour."
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. And it's something that it seems like a lot of other people want to hear about, want to talk about.
Yeah, it's the drive and the passion to be able to do something for that. I commend you to go out to LA. It's a really cool thing when people, they go out and they then show that they're successful from their work. I mean, now working with Ready Player One, following that, is there like anything that you can say, oh, this is the next thing that I'm working on right now?
I don't know. I'm kind of working on a lot of things right now, and it's funny because I actually, there is one thing that I'm very passionate about, and I can't talk about it too much, but
Sure.
It's a comedy that I've been working on with my writing partner / best friend / roommate for we've been working together for like 8 years, and it's basically since I moved to LA, and I just thought she was the funniest person I've ever met and has great ideas. And it's one of those things, yeah, where you just talk to someone for hours and you're like, wait, we could actually maybe not make money off of this, because that's never gonna happen.
That's a secondary thought, yeah.
But we could actually like do something with this. And so we've been working on this script for a few years now, and we're finally at a place where we feel really, really good about it, and we're sending it out to producers and getting some really good feedback on it. So that's one project. And with writing, it's not the same as like, oh, I'm directing this movie and it's going to come out at some point. When you're writing, you have no idea what's going to happen with it, if it's going to become, if it's a TV pilot and someone's going to read it and want to make the show, or if someone's just going to read it and want to hire you to work on their show or to write their next film. But I am working with a couple of authors right now, adapting their work and getting paid to adapt their book into a script that will hopefully be taken out to market, and they can hopefully sell and make into a movie. So
that reminds me, that'd be a good opportunity to ask this question. I don't know really how much you can delve into this, because I'm sure NDA really hits you hard when it comes to this.
Oh, yeah.
Being that you worked on it. So Ready Player One obviously was based off of the book that came out in 2014. Was no what year?
13? 13?
It wasn't that long. It was a little longer ago, maybe.
Maybe 2015. Anyway, it's obviously there was the book that came out originally.
Right.
Would you say that this adaptation, or movie, I should say, is that closer to the book itself, or is it like, here's the book, there was this plot, and we kind of just took the core out of it?
Do you take a lot of creative liberty?
Well, you always have to in a movie. Like a movie can never be a faithful adaptation of a book, and it's sort of the same with games. When you as you guys probably know, you can maybe count on one hand the amount of decent video game adaptations. Because
into a film, yes.
Right.
The Resident Evil movies especially are such a drastic departure from
Right.
the games.
But
Anyway.
it's like, it's sort of, you have to capture the spirit of the game in order for it to work. You can't copy the story, because there is no story. That's why it's a game. It's you create your own story, and that's what's great about a game. With a movie, you have to take a lot of creative liberty, but you do have to keep the spirit of it. So with Ready Player One, I wouldn't say that we deviate too much from the book in a way. I hope fans are always going to be upset, but hopefully people will be pretty psyched by how much, and the trailer definitely shows this, like how much we keep from the original book. But we did have to take some liberties, because in order to turn a book into a cinematic experience, you have to make it cinematic. Like with the book, you have an inner monologue, and you get to really, there's so much time to explore the character relationships and things like that. Whereas in a movie, you kind of got to keep it going,
Right.
keep it moving, especially a Steven
It's like,
Spielberg
you have
movie.
roughly
definitely,
2 hours,
yeah.
and you better make this good.
Yeah. So we had to sort of condense and shape things into a way that lent itself into a narrative and into a film, in a way that's satisfying and entertaining, but still keeps the spirit of the main characters that everyone loves and the world that everyone loves. And I think that I don't even need to say this, but Steven did an incredible job of capturing that world and making it real. When I saw the trailer, I was just like, you can't see my head exploding, but that's what happened.
You have to imagine it through some form of acting.
Yeah, you're.
My mind just went boom.
Yes.
Yeah, your mom, when I was talking to her, and she said the first time she saw it was on a small little iPhone screen. And
Yeah,
she was
it's
like,
not the same.
whoa, but then she saw it in like a theater, and it was a much bigger reaction. And I do think it's just so cool that you can work on something like this. Because I remember when I first saw the trailer, it was through watching a lot of Comic-Con leaks and a lot of Comic-Con stuff. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Because I didn't hear of the book before then.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, what is this? Dude, this looks super awesome. The Iron Giant.
Yeah.
All those video game characters.
I think everyone just went Iron Giant. I feel like that's just the majority. That everyone was just like, Iron Giant is in there. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that that's based on that. I think that the mindset for this movie is a really cool ideal. You're set in 2045. You know, this is a world. It's so weird how they describe it because it's such a pop culture 80s pop culture, experience, but then you also see how it almost looks practically post-apocalyptic with like thousands of different cars that you see.
Yeah.
Someone just sits in, they put this thing that goes around their neck, and now they're in this big virtual reality situation, which that's kind of scary how we're really close to that situation.
Exactly.
Microsoft's HoloLens, if you see much of it, augmented reality is going to be something that's going to be a pretty crazy thing to think about. Just kind of like imagine, so like we'll take writing for an example. You're just sitting there and you just can envision what you're writing there, or you can craft what you'd like to craft right off the bat. Like that would be the craziest thing to me. You know, people would use it for engineering and stuff, but I could just imagine when people start learning how to make stuff creatively like that. Just sit there. Like for example, we're just sitting in the radio station right now, and it's all of a sudden we're just like, all right, let's come up with this idea. Boom, here it is right there. Whoa, it's a 3D, texture that's on that.
Totally.
And that's why I'm studying technology.
Well, and I have a little bit of expertise with this because I've done this for 11 years. I write a lot of scripts. I write a lot of outline. In high school, I wrote a lot of skits for a talent show or whatever. And kind of from watching that trailer for Ready Player One, kind of gave me the same feeling of like when he puts on the glasses and it goes through like that different world. Kind of an escape, which is what I've always seen writing as, what I've always seen doing radio as, doing podcast of, is kind of this nice escape that you can get into. And when I saw the trailer, I immediately connected with that, and I'm so excited to see it because just like that feeling is something I haven't felt for a while, and it's just so nice to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. I agree. When you first see when you see the trailer or you read the book and what's so great about the Oasis, which is the fictional world that everyone sort of lives in, is even though there is something a little sad about the fact that everyone has to log into a fictional world because the real world is terrible. Sometimes I feel that way now. I want to escape into a fictional world.
There. I mean, it's really scary to see because you see all these films. I don't know why, but Back to the Future
totally
was this mindset when we finally hit that present point that was in Back to the Future. You start looking back at what actually came true in that sequence, and they're like, well, we don't have hoverboards. Yes, we do.
Right.
Actually, have you ever seen anything over the water? Those things are crazy, and also you can really hurt yourself. I found out with those things.
I mean, probably the most amazing thing was the Cubs winning the World Series because as a huge Cubs fan...
See, that would have been crazy if it happened that same year.
That would have been,
but being a Cubs fan, I don't know if you're much of a Cubs fan. I know that you said you lived originally in Chicago, so kudos to all Cubs fans.
Yeah, I'm not I don't watch the Cubs every day, but I definitely was like, oh my God, the Cubs are actually going to win the world's, we're living in the Matrix.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
That's the only explanation. Or the Oasis.
Either that or either the end of the world is probably coming, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Cubs won the World
that was
Series.
the only good thing that happened last year.
I'm okay with that. They can get rid of the curse, it's fine. We'll just take care of it from there. So getting closer up on time here, but what we can do is we can go back through a couple other films that you've gone through here. So we talked about Park City. We've talked about Atari. There's, let's see, miscellaneous crew for Ready Player One. I thought I had one more. on here, but I guess my resources.
I didn't know I
correct.
was on IMDb for Ready Player One yet. That's exciting.
Yeah, you are.
See, that's how the spoilers
no,
work. Miscellaneous crew.
You're just miscellaneous
Yeah.
crew on there. I'm just like, okay, sure. You look through, and there's just this category of just different people. It gives your actual role when you go into that section. But, yeah, IMDb can be quite the resource. I barely use it, but apparently I'm just like, whatever.
I'm really psyched that I have like this
I
many
know.
things on
Isn't
my
that
IMDb
crazy?
page. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Search engine optimization. You
Yeah.
can look up your own name, and you're like, I exist now.
Yeah,
I
I'm a
was just a
person. I'm
writer.
on the internet.
I only got someone coffee, but I was on there.
Yeah.
Well, as we do have a little bit of time left with you, on this very radio station that we're at, WRHC 106.7, and WRHZ 93.5.
That's how we
throwing
plug
those out
right
there.
there. That is how we plug.
Well, when this station started up in 2005, there were 4 original programs that started, like the main 4. And one of them was actually a good friend of mine that did a film review and a film analytical show. And I ended up helping him with that for about 3-4 years. So, to me, I always want to ask this question to people because you can always tell about people from their their movie taste and their music taste. So, what is, if you had to say...
You're not going to ask me what my favorite movie is, right?
What is your favorite movie, and what is the worst movie you've ever seen?
Oh my god.
Those are two...
It's such a hard question to answer as a filmmaker because there's so many movies.
If you'd like to help, you could do like top 3 best, top 3 worst.
Or like some of
Technically
your
top 3,
favorites,
bottom
some
3.
of your least favorite, something like that.
Or,
That's a good
or
idea.
even another way you could put it too is, what are some films that you've seen that when you watched it, it really drove you into this new ideal? Like you saw this movie and you're like, man, I really want to move into this direction. And then you saw another film and was like, man, I really don't want to move to this direction.
Right. Well, I think I would go back to Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, as the first movie that I saw that I was like, I'm going to make one of those. Like, whatever they're doing, that is really cool.
That is mine.
That's awesome.
That is mine.
That is mine. And I was obsessed with Star Wars as a kid. So that definitely got me into all things science fiction and space. But I also saw a movie that's the cheesy version. It's not like a terrible movie, but I saw Moulin Rouge when I was 13.
Oh, boy.
I know, I'm such a girl. So opposite end of the spectrum. That's why
yeah.
I'm saying I can't even narrow it down. I have like my top 10 I would just go on forever.
The Moulin Rouge version of Smells Like Teen Spirit is a little weird.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy.
The soundtrack is crazy.
It really is.
But it is like beautiful, like aesthetically, it's just insane. And so the fact that someone could do that too, just make something like a play on film with just great. So, and then the worst movie, man, I don't know. I truly cannot watch another like bad to mediocre superhero movie. Like I have no more room in my life for them. And I shouldn't even say this, but because my boss wrote the first one. But
Oh, no.
when I saw the second Avengers movie, I fell asleep
Yep.
in the theater, and I was like, this is like the E.T. video game. That this is the movie version. They just like rush this and like they don't care at all. Like this is terrible.
To be fair, they probably paid for the brand, and after that, they didn't have to remake it.
Oh
make
no!
it even
All
better.
those actors are making so much money they don't
Yep.
care.
Yeah. You're not wrong, because I remember when I saw the first one, I was like, whoa, this is so cool, big action, the story's great and everything. And when I watched the second one, I actually was checking my watch throughout most of it, like, is it over? Is it over? Is something going to happen? Is it over? And I completely get what you mean.
That's why I love Deadpool so much. I literally loved that movie
Yep.
because I was like, thank you. Somebody's making fun of these.
Something is always happening,
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
And
it's
so-
great.
Oh man, we were
Great.
just talking about that because T.J. Miller was in Deadpool, so we
Yeah.
were talking about it beforehand. How he was the bartender.
He
we
was
just
great.
started spitting up. We won't repeat them because we're on the radio, but we just the great work that he had.
I know what I got to
Gosh.
do.
Did you ask, since you were a big
Star
fan
in
of
horror
Deadpool?
movies. T.J. Miller is the best voice.
Yeah,
yeah,
he does.
tons
He
of
just
them.
great one-liners.
Did you ask him about anything with Deadpool, where you're like, man, what were your thoughts when you did Deadpool? Or you probably didn't have the time for it.
Not really. I guess when you like are working with someone, you're sort of like, I don't want to be a nerd, so I don't want to like ask him, even though I totally
There's a
want to
point
ask
that you
him.
don't want to be starstruck in front of them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're like, I really want to be starstruck. In
Right.
Front of you.
I just wanted to be cool. And with Steven, he actually was talking a lot about his old movies. And Zach is my boss Zach, like was such a huge Spielberg fan as a kid, but he totally played it cool, like on set. He was like, "Oh yeah, so Steven, what do you think of, whatever, this New Yorker article?" But then Steven would start talking about when he made Jaws and this underwater shot, and both of our heads were exploding. Me and my boss, we were both just like, "What? Like, this is so cool."
The fuse is ticking down just hearing you talk about it, because that's so cool.
Yeah, it was really, really cool.
To be able to pick minds of geniuses, I think that's a really important thing to do, especially when you're like introduced and you're first in that scene. Because I mean, for you now walking out from Spielberg, I'm sure that you have this feeling of like, okay, I'm motivated. I've now seen the top bar.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to see what's going to follow up after that is whatever I'm going to drive myself to do. I got this when, I don't know if you're much of a basketball fan, but I got an opportunity to be in Tom Izzo's house, Michigan State basketball coach, and got to sit in his $15 million basically mansion and just kind of realize like what kind of work came into it, and then to be able to sit in on his practices and physically get to talk to him. I was like 17 at the time, and my brother snuck me in as a quote assistant coach for his team in high school. So that was kind of cool to be able to just pick his brain and just see how people who have made it to the top and how they continue to drive themselves to make that next step.
Yeah.
And then just start picking their brain and be like, how did you get successful? How did you get successful? What was your pivoting point that came out of it? So it's really cool to see that for sure.
I guess when I met Steven, I didn't, after working with him working for him for a couple days, I realized, like, I don't need to ask him why he's successful because it's clear as day now that I'm seeing him work. He's just working constantly, and he loves what he's doing, and he's super good at it because he's just got a ton of experience. So I was like, I don't even need to ask him now. I just need to work that hard for the rest of my life.
Right.
And also be super talented. It's that too. But.
It's a testament example of someone who doesn't matter what the paycheck is. That's their pride. That's their passion. And that's what they want to move forward into the future. I mean, he could, not right now because his name tag is, I'm sure, over probably, I think he's over 100 million. I'm trying to remember what his actual net.
Oh my, yeah.
I'm trying to remember what Spielberg's net worth is right now. But anyway, that doesn't matter because the man's pretty much been well respected across the entire platform. But
I'd like to say thank you to you, and also thank you to your mother for facilitating this. She
wrote me into this one, but it was totally worth it.
She's a great friend of ours and has come to my other show, my Friday night show, many, many, many times. And if you're ever in town, stop by any of our shows because we'll make sure you're properly supplied with a beverage. And,
thank you.
Enjoy our.
I will need another beverage.
Just like that, yeah.
That's fine. This is fine because this is how you bribe people.
No, this is great, you guys. Thank you for inviting me.
For sure, it was a really good opportunity to just pick your brain and see how things are over on the actual. I guess I'll call it the AAA platform as we kind of use in game in one sense or another.
Ooh, cool.
But is there anything that you'd like to plug? Anything? Is it like follow me on Twitter, or do I have a website, or is there anything that in particular you'd like to take this opportunity to be like, hey guys, check me out on this?
I wish I did. I don't really have a website at the moment because I'm sort of in between projects, and I'm not on Twitter, so I need. I guess I need to have.
I can help you on that.
Oh yeah, I'll hit. Yeah, definitely.
Sweet. That's one of the things. I'm a networking major in school, so it's kind of a.
Well, you should actually just be my networking coach because that's what I'm not good at.
That's fine. It is what it is. I mean, I'm not going for my Cisco CCNP and database management to go for corporate America, but hey,
good for you.
But anyway, outside of that, thank you everybody that tuned in today. Fun little Level Up Weekly episode to get an opportunity to physically come in and interview Hannah Rosner again from Ready Player One as the most recent work, and of course with Atari.
Atari Game Over and many other things. Thank you so very much. And before we get going, I want to plug our few things, including our FTK.
Yeah, this is an opportunity to plug in everything. As you know, we just got done with Level Up FTK. There's more to come. We have some things that I still can't tell you about yet because we don't know yet. So just stick around, okay? Listen to our podcast. We'll tell you about it soon. All
T-shirts.
right?
T-shirts.
T-shirts are still available through another week. If you guys are interested and you'd like to pick one up, you can pick them up at Custom Ink. Just search Level Up FTK. You'll find our T-shirt right there. Has our logo on the front, hashtag Level Up FTK 2017 on the back. All proceeds from those shirts will go back to the charity, and which that will help the extra $1,500 that we raised already for them. Outside of that, keep our podcast live. Support us on Patreon here, patreon.com/levelupweekly. Follow us on Twitter for any awesome updates and just great tweets in general. It's the Twitter account of Level Up Weekly. Come on now. Twitter.com/levelupweekly. And outside of that, I think we are all set to go here. Hannah, thanks again for being here. Really appreciate it. Join us next week for your Level Up experience.